in the case of a rider that's stiff and braced, but trying to use pressure and release to get the horse to go, there's both things happening, and whichever one ends up kind of being stronger, more motivating for the horse is the result that you're going to get as far as are they going to change to go more forward, or are they going to actually get more and more resistant to going forward. And I do believe too that behavior is always shifting and changing. It never just stays completely the same. There's always changes that are going on. So the more we can be aware of this process, the more we can pick up on when things are not going in the direction we would like, and hopefully make some good shifts. So I'll just kind of pause for a minute because I can't see the comments. So Julia, do we have any questions about that first piece with the lazy horse? And then I'll talk a little bit more about how you can use that same concept of releasing to teach, and using that with the riding aid for the horse that's on the other end and going too fast.
Nope, no questions. We were still having some audio issues.
So with the horse that is going too fast, it's usually the same principle that's the problem, but just in a different way. So with the horse that goes too fast, a lot of times riders will end up kind of staying choked up on the reins. So they keep the reins really tight and they hold the horse. And just with the slow horse, there's this feeling of you've got to have a strong leg and pushing to keep going. With the hot horse or the forward horse, there's this opposite that you've just got to hold him. You've got to keep holding him. And the key there is also that you have to release the pressure when they do slow down. And with both of these cases, maybe even more so with the forward horse, sometimes the trick is feeling just that little bit of slowdown and releasing on that. It's not necessarily going to suddenly be that the horse is just going to slow down by 5 notches and hold that. You're going to have to look for those little moments to be able to release on, to encourage the horse that, like, yes, this is the right direction, and keep them moving in that way. I saw a few, sometimes when the comments scroll up here on the bottom, I can see. So hi Adam, hi Teresa. I know we have more people on than you, but I just see the comments that come up. So thank you for watching live. Just like we have to be careful with the horse of not going forward is something getting in the way that's making it hard for that horse to go forward. On the other side, with a horse that is really fast, sometimes horses will tend to rush if they're feeling uncomfortable, and this is where you get into the personality. Like some horses, when they feel discomfort, they kind of want to shut down and stop moving. Other horses are going to move even more. So common causes for horses going too fast outside of training errors are usually poor fitting saddles. It can also be a rider that is out of balance. So some horses, when they feel the rider out of balance, then they try to rush because they're trying to catch their balance. It can just be general anxiety. So it could be asking too much too fast from the horse. It could be the environment. If the horse is normally fine at home, but you go to the show and he's really forward, it might be that you're going to have to work a little differently and help him to adjust to that busier, more stressful environment of the show. But from a training concept, you want to, with the horse that's going too fast, you want to make sure that you're balanced in a way that you first can physically release the reins. So a lot of times with horses that go too fast, and if you're used to riding one like this, I've seen where the rider has a position where they rely on that pressure of the reins in order to keep themselves steady. So a little test for yourself is, can you ride on the buckle? Can you ride without any contact at all in all 3 gaits and feel steady with your own balance and with your own seat? So from that point, then when you're riding horses going too fast and you pick up the reins and you also look to trigger the slowdown. So if the horse isn't responding, then I look for ways like I'll kind of steer into a wall, and I'm just looking to do this like at the walk, but I'll kind of steer into the wall, and as the horse is approaching that and they have the moment where they have to back off a little bit, that triggered the right behavior, and then I can soften the reins and release on that. And I'll do that with a lot of forward horses as an exercise. So I'll kind of use the whole arena. Instead of just tracking around the outside, I kind of just go randomly around and ride into the walls. And obviously not like, I'm not looking to ride the horse into the wall, but I ride into it at a diagonal. And then when they hit that point and they kind of back off a little bit because the wall's there, that's a really good place to soften. And then that reinforces, by that release of the rein pressure, the slowing down. So the horse is able to start learning that aid, the rein pressure, as well as there's always kind of this bigger picture of what the cue really is, because it's obviously the half halt in the rider's body too. And that could be a topic for a whole nother day's session. But the horse learns that type of a pressure means this response, slowing down. The release is what clarifies that for the horse. But if you're just going around and holding, then the release never comes. The horse never figures out what was actually the right response to that. If they do slow down, but nothing changes in terms of the pressure, they're not going to learn that that's what you want. So you've got to find that point where they do even close to the right thing, and you can reinforce it. So I hope that was helpful. I know we have probably, it looks like a few questions that came in.
There was one from YouTube. Jen asked, can she explain riding on the buckle?
Sure. Yeah, riding on the buckle comes from the English style reins, because they have that buckle right in the middle. So riding on the buckle is just a term for riding on a really loose rein. It was kind of coined because it'd be like you hold the buckle with one hand, but it really just means a very loose rein, no contact.
And then this wasn't a question, but I thought it was a good comment by Teresa. She said, I'm a new rider, so overwhelmed with overthinking what signals I may be sending the horse, even accidentally.
Yeah, that is a really good point to bring up, Teresa. I think of riding or learning to ride in kind of different phases. So a lot of times in the beginning, it's just learning to really get your balance and be able to follow the movement of the horse. And you want to have that, you want to feel comfortable in that part, that you can sit balanced, you can move with the horse before you start doing, trying to give too many of the aids. So it's just that idea in the learning process of, if you pile too much on at once, then those foundational layers are harder to build because you are thinking about so much. So like, for example, when I have the opportunity to start with someone that's new to riding or like never ridden before, I like to start with lunge lessons and where I lead the horse. So they just learn the movement piece, and then you put on using the aids. And we start with just really simple aids of, finding the feeling through the body as well as the rein for halt and slow down, as well as how to use the body and the legs for rider's legs for going forward. And then also how to find the shift of the hips for steering. So I usually start with just those simple pieces. And once you have that, then you can start to build on more of the, I guess you could say, subtleties, or just the extra layers of, asking for bending, asking for individual legs to move. But if you feel like you're a little overwhelmed now, I would think about how comfortable are you with just the movement at whatever gait that you're working on. And let's say that just to kind of make it up, let's say that you're really comfortable at the walk, but when you start trotting, you feel like you don't really have the movement down yet to really go with the horse at the trot. So at the walk is where you're going to be putting more focus on your aids, like actually feeling, as you're turning, refining your aids for slow down and for asking the horse to go forward. And then when you're in trot, if you can focus more on just the movement, and you can do that by, like, the most ideal way is if you have someone to lead the horse or lunge the horse, so that they're really giving the aids and telling the horse what to do. If you don't have that opportunity, even just working in ways like, all right, I'm going to trot down the long sides where I know my horse is just going to go down the side, and I can kind of focus on what I'm doing with my body just to stay balanced and focus on that first before you start adding in, okay, now we're going to go down the side and then like trot a circle. And you just kind of keep building on it from there. So I hope that was helpful.
And then, sorry. Nathalie asked, how can I teach my horse the canter aid?
I like to start it, when I have young horses, I will start it either on the lunge line or loose, depending on how balanced they are. So I do things that might be a little bit different with most of my young horses. I do enough work with them loose at liberty that they are wanting to stay with me. So it's not that I'm chasing them, but that they're kind of wanting to stay with me. And then I can move them around and get, like walk forward and stop and change direction. Just some really basic stuff, just loose. So if I have a horse that is not very balanced with the canter, and I can tell by his lunging work just at walk and trot that if I ask him to canter on the small circle of the lunge line, he's going to have a really hard time with his balance, and he's not likely to even get it or be successful. What I'll do with those horses, sometimes just start with them loose, like in the indoor here or in my round pen, which is a pretty big round pen, and I'll ask for canter. So I'll get them moving. I'll ask for more forward, which they're familiar with that from just walk and trot. I'll ask for more forward. When they canter, I'll say the word. So I don't say it as I'm asking for it. I say it when they do it. And then I let them stop right away. I usually reward it. And I do that until, I do that for a few times. So usually like probably 2 sessions before I will start to say the word as I'm asking for it. And that's one of the things with transferring cues. So they already know like my movement, and if I'm using the whip, me using at the whip towards their birth line as I go faster. So that's a solid cue. But then when they step into the canter, because they're going faster, then I pair it with the word canter. And once I think they're starting to make that association, and that's the classical conditioning that I described at the beginning of this live session, then I'll use the word before. So I start with it loose, and I help them learn the verbal cue, and then we'll do it on the lunge line. So when they're doing it on the lunge line, now they're developing balance with it and able to hold the canter longer. And by the time I ask for it under saddle, they know the verbal cue. So I can say canter, and usually they'll just, it kind of comes together a little bit easier for them. And it's not that you can't train it just under saddle with kind of the same idea as you just ask for faster. They go into it and you use your verbal cue. But a lot of times if you're having, sorry, I was just laughing at the little smiley face that came across. Sometimes if you're having trouble with getting the canter, when the horse has a clear understanding of that verbal cue, you can just make it a lot easier. And once they have that, then I start actually putting more of the, my aid for canter is outside leg for whatever lead I want them to go on. But it's actually quickly, I can't think of the really correct term, but it's quickly becomes more subtle to it's really just the way that I shift my weight and use my seat, and I'm not even using like a strong leg. The idea that I have behind riding aids is that when we can have the idea of moving from center, meaning that we start things with shift of weight, and by using our body, like thinking about that smallest move and using our body most efficiently, we actually can better kind of trigger the right movements just through our shift of balance than if we think too much about like, I need to press with my outside leg, or I need to do this with my hand. That's an important part, but it needs to kind of start with just the good movement, and then we add those pieces in. So I hope that makes sense. I think maybe time for one more question.
Perfect. This one is from YouTube. They said, how can you slow your horse down when your horse is at a fast trot to a slower trot without accidentally walking?
So that's where you want to think about the half halt, and Well, I'll give a little plug because I think that the best description of a half halt that I've heard comes from Wendy Murdoch. And I know she's got articles on it in a few different places. So if you do just a little Google search for like Wendy half halt, something will come up. But what I found is the easiest exercise to feel the half halt is you have to make sure that you're in a good posture too. So if you're braced in your stirrups and hollow in your back, you're not going to have a good half halt. But if you are, if you're sitting correctly, if your back is soft and relaxed, so your back is flat instead of hollow, and you have your hands forward with the reins, if you can have someone come up and put one hand in front of your hand holding the reins and the other hand just here in the flat of your back. And what you want to try to do is actually feel where you expand your back to push into both of the person's hands at the same time. So what that just teaches you is the feeling of expanding through your back and keeping the space with your hand forward. So what happens a lot of times when people think slow down is they bring your arms back here, and then that tips the body forward, and then it's really hard to get an effective slow down. So another way that you can just visualize achieving the same feeling is think about if you were holding like a big watermelon. So you're holding something that keeps your arms out in front of you, and what this does is it allows for more of expanding through the back, staying open through the chest, and then you're going to be able to use your reins a lot more effectively. And if you start feeling like your hands are coming back because the horse lifted his head or you're just taking more pressure, then you want to shorten your reins so that you can keep your hand forward and keep this more kind of expansive feeling through your body as you're giving a half halt. So that is really the key, is learning the half halt, and then it's just adjusting it. So some horses, it always depends on context too, but sometimes you're going to need to use a much stronger half halt, and some horses you just think about it, and that thought is going to trigger a small change in your body, and the horse feels that and they slow right down. So it kind of depends on the horse. Another, just a really quick add-on to that, is also with your breathing. So I've mentioned it probably in a few different videos, but you want to think about breathing into the lower part of your lungs. So using your diaphragm and breathing using your whole lungs, instead of if you're just breathing up here into your chest and you're keeping your stomach tight, it's going to make it also harder to do what I was just describing of expanding the back, keeping everything open through the body. All right, I think we are going to sign off for today, but thank you so much for being on live. I hope this was helpful, and we're doing this each week. So if you have other topics that you would like me to cover, I would be happy to do so, and I'm going back and forth. So thank you, YouTube. Thank you, Facebook, and I'll see you back here next week.